They said the slippers only danced toward true love, but no one warned Mary that love could be both a gift and a curse. The Night of Spirits was the biggest event of the year in the village of Simsim, a festival where old stories danced alongside young hearts under the full moon. Laughter echoed from the school courtyard as children toured in bright Kent and Adaya cloth, drums beating like the pulse of the earth. Mary stood at the edge of the crowd, fingers trembling as she slipped her feet into a pair of old slippers, red, beaded, and humming with a strange warmth. They had belonged to her late mother, a woman whispered to have once been loved by a spirit. Some claimed the slippers carried a blessing, others, a curse. But Mary only wanted one thing, to feel beautiful for once. As soon as the music started, the slippers moved. Not just in rhythm but with intention. Mary's feet glided across the sand, graceful in ways she'd never practiced. The crowd opened around her as if pulled by invisible hands. Boys stared. Girls whispered. And Mary, dizzy with wonder, spun again and again, until one slipper flew from her foot, disappearing into the darkness beyond the fires. She gasped, the magic broken. The cold earth beat at her heel, and when she searched the ground, the slipper was nowhere to be found. Somewhere in the shadows, a new chapter of her life had just begun. Stephen didn't belong to the noisy center of the village. He preferred the edges where shadows lived and questions slept. While others danced and shouted near the drums, he was out behind the school storeroom, watching the fireflies and listening to the wind in the trees. That's when he saw something shimmer in the dirt. Curious, he stepped closer and picked it up. It was a red slipper, small and delicate, covered in beads that seemed to hum quietly against his palm. The moment his fingers touched it, a soft breeze circled him, whispering his name in a voice that didn't belong to this world. He looked around, heart pounding, but saw no one. He meant to drop the slipper, to walk away. But instead, he held it close. For reasons he couldn't explain, it felt like something important, something meant for him. That night, he couldn't sleep. The slipper sat on his table, glowing faintly, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw a girl dancing alone in firelight, one slipper missing from her feet. The slipper hadn't stopped humming since Stephen brought it home. Each time he touched it, it felt warmer, as though it knew it didn't belong to him. That night, he placed it on his wooden shelf, but strange things began to happen. A soft whisper kept calling his name just before sleep could take him. Birds gathered on his window at dawn, staring silently. When he tried to walk away from his home the next morning, the slipper tucked in his bag vibrated slightly, pulling his gaze toward the thick trees by the edge of the village. Stephen followed the feeling without understanding why. With every step into the forest path, the sounds around him softened, and a strange calm settled over him. A quiet voice, not frightening, but clear, murmured, "She waits." He didn't know her name, but her face had been in his dreams. The girl with the one red slipper. And somehow, he knew he had to find her. Mary hadn't been herself since the dance. She'd spent the entire next day searching for the missing slipper, retracing her steps and even questioning children she didn't know. But it was gone. The one she still had paused strangely against her skin whenever she wore it, as though it longed to be reunited with its pair. At first, she thought it was all in her head. But then came the dreams, vivid and strange. In them, a boy stood in moonlight, holding her lost slipper and whispering her name. She'd never seen his face before, but in the dreams, it felt like she'd always known him. Her grandmother, Agnes, noticed the change. One evening, as Mary sat on the front step staring at the sky, Grandma Agnes said, "Those slippers weren't just your mother's, they were bound by old magic. Be careful, child. Some enchantments don't just show you love. They test if your heart is strong enough to carry it." Mary looked at the slipper again and, for the first time, wondered if this was more than just a missing shoe. Stephen didn't know how long he had been walking before he had this dream. The forest was quiet, but the air buzzed with a strange energy. As he stepped out into a small clearing near the riverbank, he saw her. Mary, sitting alone on a rock with the remaining slipper on her foot. She hadn't noticed him yet. His heart raced. This was the girl from his dreams, the one the whisper spoke about. For a moment, he froze, unsure of what to say, unsure if any of this was even real. Then, almost as if guided, he stepped forward and said, "I think this belongs to you." Mary looked up, startled. Her eyes widened when she saw the slipper in his hand. The wind shifted around them, warm and soft. She stood, but didn't move closer. The slipper in Stephen's hand glowed faintly, just like the one on her foot. Something unspoken passed between them: recognition, curiosity, maybe even fear. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. Stephen didn't know how to answer. He only knew one thing: returning the slipper was no longer his only reason for finding her. Mary rushed home after the strange meeting by the river. Her heart pounded not just from the encounter, but from the way the air had thickened between them, like the forest itself had been watching. That night, she asked Grandma Agnes the truth about the slippers: no more hints, no more warnings. The old woman sat Mary down beside the hearth, stirring the fire with slow hands before speaking. "They were made by a river priestess," she said, eyes dark with memory. "Your mother was the first to wear them, long ago. They don't just lead you to love, they bind hearts. But there's a price." Mary leaned in, listening as her grandmother explained the curse. "The slippers connect soul to soul, but only if both are willing. If one heart gives in and the other does not, the magic punishes the one who returned the slipper. That boy, if he gave it to you willingly, his fate may not be safe if you don't choose him back," Agnes warned. Mary felt the blood drain from her face. She hadn't asked for any of this. But it was already too late. The slippers had chosen them. Stephen returned home with the slipper still in his hands. He hadn't given it to her yet. Something had stopped him. Maybe it was fear, or the way her eyes had flickered with doubt. Either way, he kept it close and told no one, except his uncle, Richard, who raised him after his parents died. But Uncle Richard wasn't like most men in the village. He had once been a hunter of spirits, a man who dabbled in charms and dark deals. When Stephen mentioned the slipper's glow and Mary's name, Richard's expression changed. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply stared at the slipper for a long time before saying, "That's no ordinary shoe, boy. That's power." Later that night, Stephen overheard Richard speaking to someone outside their hut. "If the girl accepts both, the magic is sealed," he said. "But if I can get the pair, I can break the bond and claim it for myself." Stephen's stomach turned. He realized his uncle didn't care about love or legends, only the power the slippers held. And now, Mary was in danger. Stephen knew what he had to do. He had to warn her, protect her, and maybe, finally, give her the slipper before someone else took it for the wrong reason. Stephen ran through the village before dawn, gripping the slipper tightly, sweat sticking to his skin. He didn't go straight to Mary's home. Instead, he went back to the river where they first met. The air was thick and the water unusually still, as if it too was listening. He knelt by the bank and raised the red slipper high. "If this is cursed, if it will bring her harm, take it," he whispered, and with trembling hands, he threw it into the river's deepest part. The water swallowed it quickly, and he watched the ripples fade, hoping the danger had gone with it. But when he returned home later that evening, the slipper was back resting in the center of his bed, dry, glowing, and warm as ever. A message was carved into the wooden frame of his window: "You cannot escape what is yours." Stephen's breath caught in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was the river, the magic, or something older. All he knew was that the slippers and Mary were now bound to his fate. Whatever happened next, he could no longer turn back. The next morning, Mary found a folded note beneath her pillow, though no one had entered her room. It was written in strange, flowing script she somehow understood. "The slippers test what they bind," it read. "3 trials await you both: to bleed without anger, to speak your deepest truth, and to let go when the heart longs to cling." The message vanished after she read it, fading into the fabric. She ran to the river, hoping to find Stephen, and he was there, waiting, holding both slippers in his hands. When they touched, the wind picked up, and a voice not quite human spoke from the trees: "Begin." Their first test came swiftly. They had to walk barefoot through the forest of thorns, where sharp roots and stones tore at their feet. Neither cried out. Blood dotted the path behind them, but still they moved forward, hand in hand. The pain wasn't the hardest part, it was watching each other suffer. Yet in that quiet torment, something deeper formed, a silent vow that if they were to be bound, it would be by choice, not magic alone. They passed the first test, hearts aching but unbroken. As they rested beside the old fig tree after their trial in the forest, the second test began quietly and without warning. The wind calmed, the birds fell silent, and the slippers between them began to glow faintly. Mary felt a pressure in her chest, like something inside her demanded to be spoken aloud. She turned to Stephen, her voice shaky. "There's something I've never told anyone," she said. "Not even Grandma Agnes." He waited, patient and still. "When I was small," Mary continued, "I used to wish I would never fall in love. I watched my mother waste away waiting for a man who never returned. She wore those slippers once. I saw how hope ruined her. I didn't want that pain. So I told myself I'd be strong without needing anyone." Her eyes shimmered. "But now, I don't know what scares me more, falling in love or losing it." The moment the words left her mouth, the wind stirred again. The forest seemed to exhale. She had spoken her truth, and the second trial was complete. Night had fallen by the time they reached the edge of the village. The final trial hovered between them, unspoken. They didn't know when or how it would come, only that the magic would choose the moment. Stephen returned home briefly to check on his uncle, but found the hut empty. A chill crept through him. The slippers had brought more than just love and truth, they'd brought attention. Dangerous attention. As he sat by the fire later that night, the test arrived in the form of a vision. Smoke swirled in the flames and showed him a life of power. He saw himself standing as chief of the village, respected and envied. In his arms was a golden staff, not Mary. A voice whispered, "Trade the girl. Trade the love. Claim your destiny." The temptation wrapped itself around him like a warm cloak. But when he blinked, another image appeared, Mary, alone by the river, barefoot and waiting. Stephen reached out and crushed the burning vision with a fistful of ash. "I choose her," he said aloud. The fire flickered once, then roared. The final trial had passed not by resisting fear, but by choosing love over power. At dawn, the voice returned, rising like mist from the earth. "Now dance," it said. "Let the village see your love, unhidden, unafraid." Mary and Stephen stood in the school courtyard where the story had begun. A new celebration had been announced, a harvest dance. But this time, the crowd wasn't there for fun. Whispers had spread. Eyes followed the two as they stepped into the firelight. Stephen handed Mary the second slipper. She put it on slowly, and the earth seemed to sigh beneath them. But just as they took their first step, Richard stormed in, his face twisted with rage. In his hand was a dark charm, pulsing like a heartbeat. "You think love is enough?" he spat. "Give me the slippers or I'll end what should never have begun." The crowd gasped. Mary tightened her grip on Stephen's hand. Around them, the drums paused. The magic, still warm in their skin, waited. The final moment had come, not just to dance, but to defy. Richard raised the charm, its shadow stretching unnaturally across the ground. "Those slippers were never meant for children," he growled. "You don't understand what they carry." Mary stepped forward, trembling but firm. "Maybe not," she said, "but we chose each other. Not the magic. Not the curse." Stephen stood beside her, and together, they began to dance. Their feet moved in perfect rhythm, guided not by spells but by trust and love. With every step, the charm in Richard's hand dimmed. The crowd watched in awe as golden light burst from beneath Mary's feet, spinning upward like a whirlwind. The slippers shimmered, responding not to fear but to truth. Richard screamed as the light struck him, flinging him backward into the dust. The charm cracked and crumbled into ash. A wind swept through the courtyard, and the voice returned one final time, "Love chosen freely is stronger than any spell." The slippers glowed once more, then melted into dust, leaving only the earth and each other beneath their feet. As the light faded, silence hung in the courtyard. Then someone clapped. Another joined. Soon the entire village erupted into cheers and ululation. Elders who once feared the slippers stepped forward, bowing their heads in respect. The spell had broken not through power or force but through the strength of a love freely chosen. Mary looked down at her bare feet, the dust of the slippers still warm on her skin. For the first time, she didn't feel bound by her mother's past, or by fear. She felt free. Stephen smiled at her, brushing a speck of gold from her cheek. "No more magic," he whispered. "Just us." The village children danced around them, mimicking their steps. Grandma Agnes stood in the crowd, tears quietly trailing down her face. She had seen what curses could do. But she also knew now Mary and Stephen had turned an old tale of warning into one of hope. The slippers were gone, but the love remained. Years passed, and the story of the enchanted slippers became one the villagers told during moonlit nights and festival fires. Children would ask if the tale was real, and the elders would smile, saying, "Real enough to be remembered." Mary and Stephen married under the same fig tree where they had passed their first trial. No charms. No glowing shoes. Just the strength of what they had built together. Their home became a place of peace, laughter, and quiet lessons where truth was never hidden and love was never forced. On quiet evenings, their daughter would pull at Mary's skirt, asking, "Tell me again about the slippers." And Mary would sit her on her lap and begin, "They said the slippers danced toward true love, but what they never said was that love has to dance back." Stephen would chuckle softly from his chair. And as stars lit the sky above Sim Sim, a new generation dreamed not of magic slippers, but of the kind of love that chooses you and stays.